Hi, HR Nation. Welcome back to the HR Leaders Podcast, the show where we explore the future of work with industry experts and HR executives from the world's leading global brands. Today, we have a special guest who is one of Ernst & Young's leaders who's passionate about purpose, culture, and leadership. Micah, welcome to the show. How are you?
Thanks. Great. Thanks for welcoming me. I'm excited to be here. Happy to talk about what we're seeing as we work on this distributed workforce. So yeah, I'm happy to be here.
Where are you joining us from?
I'm in Florida. I'm one of the people that moved during the pandemic. So I lived in Chicago for about 15 years and then moved to Palm Beach Gardens, Florida about 4 months ago.
What's the biggest benefit from Chicago? What do you like the most where you are, and what do you miss the most?
Love the weather the most. It's never cold anymore.
I knew you were going to say that.
I miss the most the food. I'm a big foodie.
Ooh.
My wife and I both are, and so I miss all the great food in Chicago.
If I go to Chicago, what's the go-to food? Like what's the recommendations?
Oh, man, there's so many good places. I love a great place that is Girl and the Goat. That's really a great one. There's some amazing pizza places like Peace and Roots, and there's so many good places.
Yeah.
What's a great steakhouses like RPM Steak, things like that.
Tell everyone a little bit more about yourself personally, your sort of background journey to where we are now.
Sure. So yeah, I've been in consulting for about 17 years. Spent almost all of it doing culture and leadership work. And I started off doing a lot of kind of an analyst, starting doing different types of things, change management, competency models. And then I had this opportunity when I was about right before I became a manager to do this culture and change survey. And I just learned all this stuff about culture and change, had all this data, and I just kind of started falling in love with the topic of culture. And ever since then, that's all, the last probably 10, 12 years, that's all I focus on. It's not all I focus on, but it's my passion. I help clients, to evolve their cultures. I help, bring their leadership teams together to drive the right culture, help, move out culture challenges that they have. And then I just love it so much that I write about it. I've probably written over 15 articles. I'm constantly talking about it. I talk about it so much, my wife could probably be on here doing this podcast telling you everything about culture.
Really?
It's my passion. Yeah.
Wow. Because normally I ask my guests, how would your family describe what you do for a living? But it sounds like your wife will have a pretty good answer.
Oh yeah. She knows it. I tell her all the challenges, all the things that I help companies through, and she pretends to be interested. And she sits there going, she's like, yeah. So, I'm sure my wife's exactly the same. She's like, yeah. Okay. What do you want to watch tonight? Yeah. Yeah.
So you were talking about culture before it was sexy.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny you say that because I can remember, years ago when I was doing this work, 5-10 years ago, if you did 2-3 projects a year as a consultant, you're like, oh, we're having a real impact. We've helped 3 companies, but now because it, like you said, it's sexy, it's so important. Now you're doing 10-15 projects a year, right? Mm-hmm. So it's really moved to the forefront and become less of a thing that people, talk about as, touchy feely,
yes,
to much more, impactful and important to the success of a company.
Have you ever thought about, because I know you've worked for, we're not going to go through your whole resume, but you've worked with a lot of the top consultancies over the years. One of the things that I hear from your peers is sometimes they miss seeing the actual implementation come to life. Sort of, the impact. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I can totally relate to that. I have some clients, that I work with 6 months to a year through diagnostic design all the way, to actually evolving their culture. And then there's others where you just do the diagnostic and you give them a plan and you hand it off. And it is, like I said, I'm passionate about this work. So I want to go beyond that. I don't want to just do a diagnostic and say, here's your challenges, here's your strengths in your culture, here's the steps you could take to shift it and move on. I want to be a part of it all the way through. And that's what, we at EY, that's what we really push with our clients, that we'll do, from design, from diagnostic design all the way through implementation. That's the real work. The implementation is where you actually get to see the behavior change, and the culture shift for the organization.
Yeah, that's the hard part, right? Not saying anyone can come up with strategy, but so that's the hard part, right? And also it's not like a set date, right? This is ongoing work. Like this is not like it's a 6-month project and that's it. Culture
Absolutely.
it evolves and it continues to evolve. We've seen how it's now evolved to something we're talking about now, to a remote first culture, which we're going to talk about a bit more on the show. And that means so many more things, so much more complexity.
Well, and the hardest part is the implementation, because that's where you're really trying to get that behavior change at scale, right? You're trying to get behavior change across the entire organization, because that's really what the culture is. It's how you work, how you behave. So to get people to actually change their behaviors, that's not easy. So you really have to think about what are those behaviors that they need to change? What do those look like? Then you got to understand what would motivate them to actually change their behaviors. And then you got to use those motivations to drive the behavior change. And then where a lot of companies fall flat is that they don't reinforce those behavior changes, right? So so many companies, and I'm sure you hear this, want to become more innovative, right? And so they write on the wall, like, here's our new value, we're innovative, here's what it looks like. But then they don't change their decision rights, right? So they still got to go through 20 levels of approval to get a new idea through.
Killing all the innovation. Yeah,
exactly. So you're creating constraints to the culture that you actually want. So that's why you got to, you want to do the whole thing. You want to change the operating model that reinforces that culture and the behaviors that you want people to see. And you can't do that just with a plan. You got to get in there and do it, with the client.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, that's good for you, because that's where you get the most satisfaction in your work, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So let's talk about obviously this kind of remote hybrid, work world we're living in right now. How do companies maintain or evolve their culture in a remote hybrid working world?
Yeah. So we at EY, we've been, since the pandemic started, we've been looking at what it means for organizations, right? From what does it mean to, we come back to work, or what does it mean as a hybrid model? What does it mean for our culture? So we've been thinking, we've done a lot of studies, talked to a lot of different clients on what that means for them. And some of what we've seen is that companies have actually been able to shift their culture faster than they ever thought, right? And the fact that they, almost out of necessity, they had no choice, right? And you could see it, a real simple example is just with technology, right? Before the pandemic, there were some people using Teams or Zoom. Post-pandemic, now everybody's using it, right? And it was just easy, right? It was a flip of a switch, and everybody could change their behaviors. And so some companies have been able to realize that with their culture, right? They've been way more communicative, right? Their leaders have been more transparent, and the employees are saying, "We love this level of transparency. This is what we want." And so they've been able to shift their culture, and it's out of necessity. Right? Because they realize, hey, if we can't see our people as much, we got to connect with them more. We got to communicate with them more. So when it comes to evolving your culture in this pandemic, or going forward in this remote work environment, right? You have to think about, like, what are the things that you want to keep? What are those strengths in your culture that you want to maintain and don't want to lose? You have to think of the elements that you need to stop. What are some of those things that have been holding us back, right? Some of the bureaucracy, some of the things that made us stuck in our ways that you kind of just fell to the wayside as part of the pandemic. And then what are the things that we need to see more of, right? Companies realize they need to see more, that communication piece, more transparency. They realize that they have to find other ways to innovate. So they need to find, more channels and avenues to innovate and bring their people together, whether they're in person or not, right? So it's really identifying those what we call the keep, stop, start of your culture, and then driving towards how do we tell people what that looks like? What are the behaviors? How do we reinforce that? Like I was mentioning earlier, that's what you have to think about. And then I think the biggest challenge that companies are trying to figure out is, how do we maintain or evolve that culture for the people that are in the office, for the people that are out of the office, so that we can make people feel like they're all working at the same company, right? And so for that, it's really changing, things as simple as rewards, right? I talk to companies about that. You used to think a reward for employee might be something like the employee of the month, or rewarding employee, they get the best parking spot, right? Now, if you gave that to somebody, they'd be like, what am I going to do with this, right? I don't even want to drive into the office. So now it's changing. Like, how do we actually, reinforce those behaviors? We can't just do, a parking spot. We need to do a different way of rewarding and acknowledging people and showing we appreciate them.
Mm-hmm. So, for example, you could use like employee recognition software as a way of doing that now, which we're seeing a big increase in.
Yeah, I've seen one. I was on this CFO roundtable. There's about 100 different CFOs, and they were talking about all the different recognition programs that they're trying. There's a lot of different tech startups that are doing recognition because they're trying to figure out how do they continue to reward and appreciate their employees, because that's one of the things that actually has suffered with the pandemic and being remote. Because typically, right, you'd be in the office and you see them, right? Walk up to you, Chris, and I'd say, "Hey, great job today, Chris." Mm-hmm. But people aren't able to do that, and they're not doing as much on the Zoom or the team calls, right? So you have to find other ways to make sure that you're acknowledging and recognizing people. Because that's a lot of what drives the behaviors of your organization.
100%. Like, I really missed that with my team. I just walk over to my sales, especially also there's not like one particular one, but especially with my sales team, whenever they get a deal, I'll make a point to go over, shake their hand, congratulate them, get everyone excited about it, and then there's an energy that comes with that is your culture, really. And even sometimes I just walk past, organically that just happens. Because you're seeing them, right? So we don't have those moments anymore. We don't have those water cooler moments, those organic moments, those hallway conversations, those lunchtime chats, those impromptu one-on-ones. All of those things are gone now.
We don't even have the breaks to make those happen. Because I think about as a consultant, I traveled a lot, and a lot of times when you'd be on your way to the airport or you'd be sitting at the airport, you'd call one of your team members and say, "Hey, I just want to tell you this week you did a great job," right? But there is no break for me to do that, because you're constantly working on calls, and that's why that's one of the things that has been missing a little bit during the pandemic, and that we have to keep thinking about as companies move to this more hybrid model, is how are we going to recognize our people? Maybe it's even leaders building in time, on their calendars to say, okay, on Fridays from 1 to 2, I'm going to call my team and, each one and let them know like what I think they did great this week. Yeah. It's, just those little behavior changes really make the difference.
What are, when clients come to you, you mentioned a couple, but what are some of the other big challenges that you see that they're facing? They're coming to you saying they need help with?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things, companies are worried about, are our employees being as productive at home? Because we can't see them, right? Where a lot of us are used to the mentality, if I see you in the office, I know you're being productive. So that's one piece. But we're doing a study called it's a Work Reimagine Leaders Forum that we're doing at EY currently to collect data to see how people are feeling about the remote environment. And so just for that productivity one I mentioned, we've seen that 53% of the respondents say they feel more productive working from home. But not all, when you look at the top of the house, not everybody feels that way. They're not sure that people are being more productive. So I think that's one thing of how can we maintain our productivity levels and still be successful. I think there also another one is like, how do we stay connected, right? And how do we innovate, right? So if we're not going to be in the office, or the office is going to change, how do we create an office environment that allows us for just innovation sessions or connection sessions, right? That's what I think that's what all clients are thinking about as well. And then also, that has to do with their whole real estate footprint. Like what is the office now? Is it just a place where we can all come in together and really connect and innovate and, build through, solve problems? Because do we really need to come in and does someone need to come in and sit at a cubicle by themselves, not talking to other people, when they could just as easily do that, in the privacy of their home?
It's true. Doesn't that seem crazy now that you would travel like an hour or sometimes longer to work to sit on a computer?
So many companies, when we talk to them about culture, they're like, "Oh, we want to empower our employees more. That's one of the biggest things that we really want to focus on." This is pre-pandemic. And now this is one of the shifts that that I mentioned that they've been able to do is they have empowered their employees because they're allowing them the more freedom, to work in the way that they want with that flexibility. So to take that, that spigot and turn it off and say, okay, we still want to empower employees, but we want to do it at the office. I think it's going to be very challenging. I mean, I've already, there's articles out there. I've seen stories. I've talked to clients that their employees are literally saying, no, we're not going to come back to the office. And the companies are saying, well, we want you to come back. And employers are like, no, we're good. We'll come back for big meetings to connect or, like I said, to solve problems. But I don't want to sit in my car for 2 hours a day and commute. Now, there's also the negative side of that. Like I was mentioning earlier, that 2 hours was part of your mental break, right?
No, there was a very clear start to an end, whereas at the moment it's like blurred lines, right?
Exactly. So now, just in my situation, right, that the car ride to the airport or sitting in the airport waiting to get on the plane, those were kind of my downtimes, right? And that's how it was for a lot of people in their commute. Without having that downtime, that's really that drains on your mental well-being, your physical well-being. So you have to build in those breaks. And I've seen a lot of companies start to do that. So one CEO that we had talked to, he sent out a company-wide invite from 12 to 1 for lunchtime that just blocked lunchtime. And he said, no meetings, right? This is your 1 hour of no meetings, not saying you have to eat right now, saying that, we need to have a block where people can have a break. And if you have an emergency, of course you can have a meeting. But the idea was, let's set some guidelines here because it's hard for employees to always set those boundaries themselves, right? Because they feel the pressure like, my team needs me or my leader needs me, or it's just the way of of a human being, right? It's hard for you to set those boundaries. Yeah. So companies are going to have to help with that and help employees through those challenges.
What are then, based on your research and what you do, what are the specific areas people listening should focus on in terms of shaping their culture? If there was like 3 things you said, look, this is where you should focus your time and energy, what would they be?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think they need to think about, one is what I was mentioning earlier is how do we make sure we create that same culture for people who are in the office and not in the office. Yeah. So I'd say that's one. Second would be how our leaders show up, right? This is going to require a different type of leader. I would say a lot of leaders used to more focus probably on what are our metrics, what are our numbers. But now you need to shift that to be a little more like, how are my people doing? What can I do to help my people? And then a third thing would probably be like how going back to the operating model, like what needs to change in our operating model that doesn't work anymore, right? These things, they were broken in the past, and we just we wouldn't admit it. Yeah. But this is raised that these things are broken and we have to do them differently. Mm-hmm. And the way we've done rewards or the way we've done performance management for the last 20, 30 years, it just doesn't work in this environment anymore.
Yeah. Have you spoke to anyone or seen any companies that have already got a good example of, or any great ideas about how you manage that hybrid model of employees being at the office and the sort of the blue collar being obviously they have to be in the factory or wherever it may be. Does anyone come up with, have you seen any good examples of how to do that right? Because that is a big concern, you're right, for everyone. You don't want people feeling like they're not included and that they're missing out on opportunities because they're not there, et cetera, et cetera. There's so many other things.
Sure. There's a couple. Yeah. So we're working with clients, over the last 6-9 months, right? Helping them with this and, what we call our work reimagined, like defining like what the future of work in this environment will be. So a couple of things come up. One, I think there's going to be a more lean on people analytics. And one of the things that we like to use is organizational network analysis, which is the social mapping of your organization. Mm-hmm. I think that's going to be more important than ever because that's the way you'll be able to understand how isolated, how connected people are, whether they're in the office or not. So that's one thing that we've been looking at. If you've seen one of these network analysis before, they look like a plate of spaghetti and meatballs, right? There's all these lines, squiggly lines, and then there's these circles which represent people. And if all the circles that are in the middle, the connected, those are the people who are collaborating, connecting. But then we've seen this outer ring of people in isolation, and those are the people the companies need to be worried about and bringing back into the fold. So I think some companies we're working with have realized that they're using that people analytics data to make sure that that we're not leaving people out by themselves in isolation and risk of depression or mental well-being. So that's one piece that I've seen companies really working on and trying to drive. I think another is we're helping companies define like what is this hybrid model going to look like. I know in the pandemic there was really no clear definition. We were all just making it work,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So now it's now that people have got a taste of it, and this is the world that they want to work in, or most want to work in going forward. It's really working with them to define like what does coming into the office look like? What is it? What do we do when we come to the office? What are some of the programs and policies around working remotely? Because you think about it right now, of course, we're all working remotely from our homes. But in the before pandemic, working remotely could have mean sitting in a coffee shop, right?
Yeah.
Sitting in a park. So it's eventually, I think we're going to go back to really I'll work anywhere, right? I mean, nobody just wants to I don't want to sit in my house all day.
Which is why I'm here in the office, by the way. Even though it's 5 minutes from my house, I just prefer to be in this location. There's like some separation from I've got an office at home, but I just would rather not be in my house and get outside. Yeah. I'm lucky that I have the choice, obviously, not everyone does, but yeah. Yeah.
No, my wife and I are both working from home, and she's always like sitting outside working. She's like, why don't you go outside? I'm like, because I got my dual monitors here. So it's kind of, I become so attached to it that I almost can't go outside, but I need to.
I love the fact as well. I would love to do a survey. It's just really random, but like everyone, it's almost like your necessity to have a dual monitor. It's like everyone, like, have you noticed that? Like in the past, we could all have one monitor, but still, all of a sudden, like, nope, everyone needs a dual monitor. I don't think I know anyone at the moment has just one monitor. It's like,
right. Yeah. Right. Well, and that's a good example of things that companies might need to do differently. Is they maybe gave stipends for expenses, right, when they travel. So that money's not being spent. So should we be giving people stipends to buy a second monitor, right? Mm-hmm. Is that the reward? Should we give people, should we reward people with giving them, a stand-up desk, right? That's the things that, a lot of companies are thinking about doing. So you asked what the best companies are doing. Well, they're defining like what will our policy be on, giving people second monitors or stand-up desks. They're defining like, what does it mean to come into the office? What does it mean to work from home? How, what are ways that that leaders should be connecting with their employees? What does that look like? Because I think for some leaders, they've been working in a certain way for so long that they lost a little bit of that human connection that is needed more now than ever. Mm-hmm. And I mean, we all get on these work calls, right? Where the first thing we talk about, right, is the metrics. How are we performing? What's our actuals? What's our goals? Now you need to start meetings with asking about how your people are doing.
How are you? Yeah, we do the same thing. Like every Monday, we just have a chat for like half an hour, sometimes longer. Yeah,
exactly.
With a team, just to, it's refreshing just to be like,
right. But some leaders, aren't used to that, and so they're going to need to grow, their empathy too, because some employees are sitting at home with 5 roommates, some are sitting at home teaching 4 kids. Right, we're all in these different scenarios. Now the kids thing will hopefully go away. They'll get to go back to school, right? But there's still everybody's going to be in different scenarios and their home work situation, right? You said you and I are lucky we have an office. Well, a lot of people don't have an office. They're just working from their bedroom, right? So I think having that understanding, having empathy and helping your employees to understand that you get what they're going through, and showing a little vulnerability yourself as a leader, saying, I've been on 10 straight hours of calls. Like, can we cancel this call? I'm just tired. And I can remember in the beginning, it would be Friday, and that's the first day I'd go outside. Crazy. Right? I'm like, oh my God, I've been in my office or in my house for 5 straight days and didn't even step outsid.
That's great. Right? No, I'm with you, man. There's days where I woke up and it was dark, and then I left my computer and it was dark. So I was like, I'm like, what? I haven't even left the day now. So I do try and make sure I get out, at least for a little bit every day.
to that point, one other thing I'll mention that, we are, a lot of companies are looking at, but we, EY are looking at for ourselves is a well-being initiative, well-being metrics, right? Mm-hmm. To look at, are we helping our people to take care of themselves, right? And that's not just mental well-being, right? That's also physical well-being, emotional well-being. It's like and tracking those things to make sure that we put programs in place and they actually are helping people. Because I think a lot of programs that have been put in place in the past were kind of check the box programs.
100%.
For some companies, right? You'd have a hotline you could call, but nobody really used it, right? But now you see that you
probably didn't even know where to find the number. It was like somewhere in the intranet somewhere.
Exactly.
It wasn't really, manager wasn't talking about it, right? It wasn't something you really had conversations around, but now we're kind of relying on our managers and our leaders to have those conversations and signpost and actually, use the platforms and tools. Many companies didn't have anything in place.
Right. Yeah. So, I think, companies are going to be looking at that more, to make sure they're, helping their employees not just do their work, but feel good about themselves, feel good about the work they're doing. Because, we're all doing different work. Like I get, an energy boost because I really love the stuff that I do. Right. And I love talking about it. But, sometimes, you could be on a project where you're just doing, data analysis for like 6 straight hours. Right. And it's like, you just got to do it. You got to get it done, but it wears on you. So we got to make sure that companies are really looking at how do we help our employees through some of the, the challenges of work and the challenges of life. And there feels like there's not as much separation as there used to be.
I'm with you. Yeah, definitely. There's been a big debate more so recently as well as we start to, obviously in the UK, where like 50% of adults have been vaccinated. There's now this conversation happening around will companies require employees to be vaccinated in order to return to work. Have you had this conversation with your clients already? Have they asked you questions around this?
I've heard, I haven't specifically had this question asked from my clients, but I've heard other colleagues of mine say that companies are asking that. And what I've seen, so I can't speak to it too specifically, but I've seen basically when that question is asked, they're asking, what are other companies doing?
Yeah, so I'm asking,
who has this answer?
No one's taken a firm stance on it. Not that I know. I haven't heard of one company, but behind closed doors, I spoke to a number of CHROs where there's like, obviously there's some members of the leadership team that's saying, yes, we want that. And others are saying, no, we can't say that. It's someone's human right. You can't force them to take a vaccine in order to come back to the office, and then you're excluding them. And it seems like, it's a whole bit of a mess at the moment, because for those companies that do want to fully return to the office, and there are many, and I spoke to one recently that have 10,000 employees, consulting company, who have just announced that everyone's returning to work and there's no flexible working. And I said to them, there's no way you're going to be able to do that until everyone's vaccinated, right? And they're like, no. So then you're expecting employees to be vaccinated. They're like, yes. So that's, it becomes that's an interesting one, right? It's going to.
Right. No, it is. Well, it's also just interesting the challenges they're going to face from a talent perspective, right? Because if other companies, say, even in their industry or their competitors are allowing for flexibility, well, what if their employees are going to say, well, I can do the same job at another company that actually gives me the flexibility that I've gotten used to and like. So I'm curious as to what, and I don't know the answer to this yet. I'm curious what that's going to mean for, when you think about the war of talent, how are companies going to position themselves best to keep their strongest and their best employees if they're saying we're only going to do it one way and we're not going to create flexibility. I think it's going to be a real challenge to keep some of their best employees when they can find another company that allows for that flexibility. Yeah,
no doubt they're going to lose talent. I don't think that any of them would say they all know that. So the ones I've spoken to, they know that's the reality, but they're also saying that we'll be attracting talent that want that in-office culture. So that's kind of their counter argument to it. And also the fact that they always describe it that, why are you returning? And they say, because we're an in-office culture. Like that's what I keep hearing. I'm sure you've heard that a lot. Like there's no other culture that can be had. It's like we're in office culture and that's it, as well. So there obviously are clear benefits to that, of course. but I do think we've gone too far now to.
Yeah, I think too, I get where they're coming from in an office culture, because what I would say, for those decisions that you're going to make around, the flexibility policies or, performance management awards, decision rights, it should all be on, does it align to our culture, right? That are we living our values by making this decision, right? That's part of why you define your culture, right? It's not to have words on a page. It's to say, these should be embedded into everything we do as
every decision. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I think these companies, we're helping companies do this. They need to think about, are some of these values or behaviors we have, are they outdated? Do they not work in this world and for employees and for our customers anymore? So do we need to change? And if we do shift those cultural elements, what does that mean for our programs, our policies? And so I think that's what they need. So when they say in-office culture, they really should define, what do we mean by that? What are the behaviors? Is it just that we can see each other in the hallway? That's not
that's not a reason for people to return. And then they're not, and the ones I would have to say, the ones I have spoken to are very clear on that, by the way. And they've actually explained to me specifically, like what you've just said as well. It isn't just because they want to see that people there working as well. So and they are giving time, right? So I'm not saying this next week you got to be back, right? So they're slowly transitioning people back, and it's going to take a long time. Like I don't think this is like an overnight thing for everyone listening. It's going to be a long time period for it, and they understand that as well. There's no way overnight they can be like, all right, everyone's coming back. That's not going to work.
Agreed. Yeah, some of the ones that I've seen that have defined, like what you're saying, part of their culture is like an apprenticeship type culture.
Oh, 100%. By the way, that's the exact example they give me. Most of them. So and they say a lot of that learning and knowledge exchange happens in that environment, and that makes sense, and that's a huge value, and that hugely valuable.
Agreed. And I think one of the challenges with the remote work and arguments for having some in office is the innovation piece, because it's hard for you can't sit at your desk like you're sitting there right now and come up with new ideas by yourself. You can, but they're going to be better when you're working with other people, right? Because you build off of one another, and that's a little harder to do via video. I like, one of the things that I miss, and I know others I've talked to, I miss being up on the whiteboard and just ideating and making something better and better.
And having the debate, right? Clients. Having that debate and discussion, being challenged, and just kind of having a diversity of thought and
exactly.
Present in the room. You are right, 100%. The counter argument to that, though, is there's a lot more innovation happening because people are now more connected. So because you're not office based, when you jump on, I don't know about you, but when I'm jumping on particular Zoom calls, I'm speaking with people in different countries and locations that would never meet.
That's true.
They never meet before. Like I had a client recently who sponsored one of our events, and I had their US marketing team, their European marketing team, and a few other people all on the call, and they'd never even met each other, and they've been working in the company for like 5 years. And all of a sudden we started collaborating on projects, and they were like, oh, we can support you here, we can support you there. There's cross-pollination of lead generation and all these other things, and a lot of innovation came from that call. That would never have happened if we was back in that work, in the in-office environment as well. So there are some other elements which virtual has definitely opened up for everyone.
No, definitely. And that's, what I was saying about the social mapping earlier, that's why I feel like that's important, because it can help you figure out who are the right people to connect.
Yeah, that's essential. It seems essential.
Connection points.
Yeah, and I guarantee you that the vast majority of companies right now, if you said to you, can you provide the data set on who's working from home and who's in it? No, most, I would say probably the vast majority don't have that right now at present.
Agreed.
To be able to do that. And moving forward, all of your policies, processes, etc., all should be based on that data, right? of understanding that as well. So that's going to be really interesting. For companies that don't have a people analytics function in place or a person in place, that's probably going to be number one on their agenda right now, getting someone in place as well. But from the sounds of what you're saying, we really need to question and reassess everything from the top down. Really?
You do. I mean, but at the same time, I think what's, I mentioned like the key piece is like, you don't want to lose who you are. Yes. As an organization. So if you've always been, you're a customer centric company. You are all about your customer. And you still want to be that way. So like, but what does being customer centric mean for you now in this new world? But that's still one of your key values. But maybe now you're saying we used to be more rigid, right, and bureaucratic. We need less of that, and we still want to be customer centric, but we need to be more flexible. Right, that's the culture shift we need to make. But we keep one of our strengths, but we drop down one of our challenges and bring and elevate parts of our culture that maybe existed, but we need to see a lot more of now. And the pandemic has accelerated that. Right, companies have been talking about being more agile, flexible for years, and I think some of them didn't know if they could do it or didn't think they could do it, and they started to prove to themselves. Like the pandemic has proved to companies, hey, we can do things differently very quickly. And so how do we maintain these when we start to get back in the office? Well, the only way to do that is make sure we don't let some of these old ways creep back. And we don't let these old programs, policies, processes creep back. And we got to introduce new programs, new policies, new ways of working so that we can be a different culture and be even more successful company.
Amazing. Well, look, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. It's been a pleasure. And obviously, just for people that are aware, I came across yourself through the influencer report that came out of the top industry influencers for remote work. So congrats on that as well. So obviously your hard work is definitely not going unnoticed. So keep up the amazing work there as well. But before I let you go, if there's sort of a parting piece of advice you want to give to our listeners, what would that be? And then where's the best place for everyone to connect with you if they want to reach out and say hello?
Sure. I'll answer the second one first because it's easier. Just, they can reach me at EY, Micah.Alpern@ey.com, or obviously connect with me on LinkedIn. Those are probably the two best places to reach me. Parting thought. I think companies have to really, and leaders need to focus on their culture. And I don't mean just defining what it is, but really managing it and evolving it and taking action. And it goes beyond just talking about it. A lot of clients that I've worked with in the past or work with now, their whole thing is once we define the culture, let's just communicate it, right? And just keep communicating it. But that's not enough. Just talking about your culture is not enough. So it's really, living the culture, right? Identifying behaviors that you're going to live as a leader, as an employee, and living them every day. And then talking about like, I live this behavior. Here's what it did for my customers. Here's what it did for my coworkers. So it really is about, it's less about communicating and even more so about actually living those behaviors and making sure, as I said a couple times in here, that you're reinforcing those behaviors in everything you do in your organization. The culture feeds into everything. So those are the last things that I think about that I probably tell every client, every employee, every company that I work with.
Well, love it, man. Well, look, thanks a lot. I appreciate you sharing your advice. I know our listeners will be a lot better off for it, and I'm sure a lot of them are going to connect with you. So expect some emails and some LinkedIn requests. I wish you all the best until we next speak.
Sounds good. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks.
Appreciate the time.
Thank you.